recreation of the new day.
Well, I'm very fortunate to belong to what I think is a small and elite group of people who have benefited from the passion this church here, Unity Church of Hawaii, has for education and training of ministers. And this morning, it is my special joy and honor to welcome back another of my cohort in that journey to give us our message this morning. Geo Downer completed his internship and is now serving as the spiritual leader at Windward Unity, and we welcome him this morning.
Thank you, Margie.
Hello.
Aloha and good morning. On this day, I'd like to speak with you about our daily bread of life. It's something that's particularly passionate to me. It's an incredible honor to be here, to be home, where I've begun this new career. This amazing world is opening up to me. And my career up until the point that I stepped into my calling was in the food service industry. And that took many different forms, and one of them was as a baker. You see, I was a baker for about 2 years. It was almost as long as I could stand it. Yet I learned some truly amazing, wonderful things while being a baker. One of them was that each and every day was brand new. There were different factors to consider throughout each and every day. The humidity might be a little bit different. The temperature outside was slightly different. Or the mood that one of the workers who was forming the bread was a little different. So it was for me to respond to the bread, to respond to this living thing that I was preparing. You see, I prepared artisanal bread. It was a bread that was a work of art. That's what I aspired for it to be. It was something that I gave particular special attention to each and every day. Now, bread is made in a factory the way that most of us see it. But this particular bread that I was shaping was started by something that wasn't as easily predictable as just adding yeast to flour and water. It was started with something called a levain. Some people call it a chef. It's a starter. It has a different quality about it. It's different from yeast in that it's unpredictable. Very much like life. Life can be pretty unpredictable. Yet it's important for each of us to be responsive to each and every moment. Whether it's the humidity or the temperature or the mood of those around us, it's essential that we respond to life itself, to the bread itself. As I shared with you, it was artisanal bread, which is a word that most people don't use, but it does sound really nice, doesn't it? Artisanal bread, an art form. It was a way that I was taught to form the bread close to your heart so that you could give each individual loaf particular attention. You'd seal the skin and then form it and shape it and place it to be proofed, to be ready to go into the oven. And each and every day was different, just like life. Today is also World Communion Day, as Reverend Mindy shared with us. It's a time when we recognize the unity that we have in Christian faith, yet I also believe it's a recognition of the unity that we have in spirituality itself. It's a day when we can recognize the unity that we have in God. We claimed that at the beginning of the service today with the affirmation, there is only one presence and one power. World Communion Day is a time when we can recognize that truth. A day when we can celebrate the newness and the wonder of each and every day. This morning, I'd like to share with you a passage from the Gospel according to John. When I was growing up in the Christian faith, John was by far my least favorite gospel. It was really hard to understand, and it seemed to speak to separation. It seemed to be really harsh and difficult to understand. Yet once I came into the unity movement, I got an understanding of the fact that John speaks, when Jesus speaks in John, he's actually speaking from the Christ presence, the universal perfection presence that's within each and every one of us. From John, the 6th chapter, the 35th, 36th, and 51st verse, Jesus said, "I am the bread of life. The person who aligns with me hungers no more and thirsts no more, ever. I have told you this explicitly because even though you have seen me in action, you don't really believe me. Anyone eating this bread will not die, ever. I am the bread, living bread, who came down out of heaven." Now, imagine when Jesus said this and he was telling people you would never have to hunger or thirst ever again. That sounded really good, huh? Because at the time that Jesus said that, that artisanal quality of life, of where you had to pay particular attention just to eat, sounded really great. I don't have to ever be hungry or thirsty again, ever. So that was a really amazing thing. And he also said that I came down out of heaven. In the unity movement, we recognize that what we believe Jesus was talking about was that heaven is a state of consciousness. It's not something that comes outside of us, but springs forth from within us, within our heart, and with our decision to make a commitment to love. We can actually spring forth in heaven every day. In the same way that bread springs forth, the little holes that perforate and make it spring forth and ready to bake, ready to be eaten on a new day. So what Jesus was actually saying was, eat me, that universal Christ presence. Consume that Christ presence within you. Allow it to be within the flow of your life, to live in the truth of who you are. Charles Fillmore addressed this in his commentary, The Revealing Word. He spoke that the fact that Christ abides in each person as potential perfection. Christ, the universal divine idea that is spiritual perfection in all of us. It's also in each of us. That idea is something that flows through us. It's not something that's eaten and then gone. It's something that continues and grows forth. The chef, the levain, the starter is the Christ presence within us. It's the thing that grows within us and brings us forth into the world as heaven itself. You see, we're a metaphysical church. We see things beyond the physical. We look at the way that Jesus spoke in a metaphysical and also a metaphorical manner to see the truth within us, that universal Christ principle that's present within each and every one of us. Gandhi, who was a particularly amazing teacher, in more recent times stated, there are so many hungry people in the world that God could only come into the world in the form of food. That form of food is that Christ presence within you. My invitation to you today is to recognize that universal, eternal presence and consume that, eat that on your daily basis. To recognize how you can spring forth in love, that particular care of consciousness, the same way that you would form an artisanal loaf of bread. You take particular care to the way that you think and the things that you speak and the way that you go through your life. I'd like to read on further from the 6th chapter, from the Gospel according to John. Jesus says, "The Spirit can make life. Sheer muscle and willpower don't make anything happen. Every word I've spoken to you is a spirit word, and so it is life-making. But some of you are resisting, refusing to have any part of this. Sheer muscle and willpower don't do anything at all. Well, without a consciousness of heaven behind it, without a consciousness of the Christ within it, it doesn't really accomplish much, except sometimes give us an idea about separation. My invitation to you today is to recognize that each unfolding moment is a holy instant. This morning we began with affirming, I am here on a holy purpose. That applies to each one of us. Each one of us is on a holy purpose to be the bread of life, to be the starter, the chef that springs forth into the world, to be the bread of life. Charles Fillmore, in his commentary entitled The Mystery of John, Charles Fillmore is the co-founder of the Unity movement, states, "Whoever enters into the mind of spirit will have poured out to him its life essence and be wholly raised up from material conditions." It's the very thing that Jesus spoke to, that spirit is the very thing that does everything in the world. Pushing something through and forcing it generally causes difficulty or suffering. But as we have a consciousness of the Christ behind it, a consciousness of love, we accomplish much. Father Richard Rohr, who is the founder of the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is a Franciscan friar who studies extensively about meditation and prayer. He states, "Remember, the ego wants containment and control. It is only the soul that wants meaning and mystery. The meaning and mystery that you have within your soul, within your consciousness, is that Christ presence that comes forth to create a world anew. If our ego, we decide that we have to accomplish something in a particular way, my experience has been that that causes difficulty in my life, not only for myself, but for others around me. But as I stay in prayer and meditation, as I approach each day with an attitude of gratitude, I can accomplish much. That more can flow forth from within me into happiness and connection and communion with the people around me. Communion was also a way that Jesus spoke to the bread of life. Bread was a way that people sat down together to join with one another, to be in relationship and community. You've heard the phrase, let's break bread together. It comes from that. It comes from the recognition that we are in relationship with one another. Not only with one another, but we are also in relationship with ourselves. So as we learn to respond in love to the people in our lives, no matter who they might be, the stranger on the street, our children, our partner, or the person sitting next to you in the pew, as we learn to respond in love, we can create our world anew in that very way. I am the bread of life. Here in Unity, as a metaphysical church, we see Jesus as the way shower, as an example to follow, not an exception. So I want to invite you to claim that you are the bread of life. Do that with me out loud together. I am the bread of life. Yes, you are. And just as forming the bread, you come forth with flexibility and adaptability, yet knowing that your foundation is within your starter. I want to invite you to claim this with me out loud. Together, grounded in the truth of Spirit, I am flexible and adaptable. Yes, you are. We have an opportunity to recognize that no matter what be going on outside of us, the truth of us is that universal Christ presence that is unchangeable, that is something that we can lean upon as we are flexible and adaptable in the world. And lastly, that very Spirit with which you can form each individual loaf in love, you can claim this truth as well. Would you claim this with me out loud? Together. I am love. My invitation to you is that you go forth to recognize the love that you are. So how do we do that? How do we actually go forth in love? That all sounds great, Geo, but what does that mean? What that means is that whenever you're in that situation and someone might be disapproving of you, I invite you to recognize the truth of who you are as a valuable human being, as a valuable expression of God. The way that we do that is that we go forth and we recognize when we come home and perhaps everything is not as we had expected it to be, then we respond in love. How can I help? What can I do to assist? The way that we do that is that we hold the entire world in a consciousness of love rather than a consciousness of separation. As I said before, today is World Communion Day. It's a time when we can recognize the truth of all spiritual paths. Reverend Mindy mentioned the Granth, which is the powerful spiritual scripture of Sikhism. From the Adi Granth, it states, "Let all mankind be thy sect." What a world we would have if we recognize that everyone in the world is our sect, that there is indeed no separation. There may be differences in opinion, but there is indeed no separation for all mankind. From the Iroquois religion, Hiawatha stated, "My children, listen well. Remember that you are brothers, that the downfall of one means the downfall of all. You must have one fire, one pipe, one club." When we recognize that Christ's presence that's within us, then we can see that that one fire, one presence, and one club is available in everyone on this planet. Today is not only World Communion Day, it's also a very special day. I believe in celebrating holidays, and there is one holiday that you may be aware of. It's called Pulpit Freedom Sunday. Now, you might have read about this in the news. It's a time when a number of people within Christian denominations have made the decision that they will endorse a particular candidate from the pulpit. Now, being a member of Unity, I am not about to endorse a particular candidate from here. Well, first of all, we don't have a pulpit. And I also believe in unity. Now, there is a candidate that I do particularly support, but my invitation to you today is that whoever is the candidate that you don't support, that you take some time in prayer, that you pray for them to see the unity in all of life. No matter how you may perceive that other candidate, I invite you to pray for all of them. Pray and see in truth our political process, that it actually goes forth and creates a world that works for all of us. Here in this United States of America, we stand for a recognition of unity, yet we see that there are some differences of opinions amongst us, but we are all indeed one. So my invitation to you, once again, is no matter how heated and difficult that political process may appear to be, that you hold and see the truth, that you hold and see that there is indeed only one, and that God is coming forth in this world to create love and compassion and connection and communion. So to review, as you go forth in this next week, I'm sure that on one of those days you're going to sit down to a meal. As you sit down to that meal, my invitation to you is to recognize the flow of life that comes to and through you and from you. That you bless your food. That you recognize that you are the bread of life. And that isn't just separated off into that wheat paste flour thing that's baked. It's everything that you eat. It's every aspect of your life. Go forth and recognize that life and love and that Christ presence is here and now. I want to invite you to claim with an affirmation once again, together. I am the bread of life. And as we go forth and discover that each day is new and each circumstance and situation is different, we can go forth and claim out loud together, grounded in the spirit of truth, I am flexible and adaptable. And most importantly, the very starter from which springs forth the entire world, this affirmation that we can live in by claiming with our voice out loud together, I am love. So I invite you to recognize the truth of who you are as you go forth through this week. Right now, just take a deep breath. Relax. And this time we will take a moment to be still. Close your eyes if you're comfortable in doing so. Beloved presence, we recognize that each of us is the bread of life, here to bring gifts and nourishment, here to spring forth into a life of love and communion. We take time right here and right now in the sacred and holy silence.